Hello YouTube, and welcome to part 2 on our Space Marine painting tutorial series with our Gravis Armoured Blood Angels Captain. Today we're going to be talking about non-metallic metal, both gold and silver, and I'm hoping that I can show you a painting method here that, whilst it will not be able to give you the absolute best, most top tier non-metallic results, will remove a lot of the headwork for you and hopefully just start to give you some building blocks from where you can go off on your own and start to figure out how to really get to grips with this technique. So let's jump into some down cam footage and get on with showing you some non-metallic gold and silver. Okay, so first of all let's talk about the colours that we're going to be working with. Over a black undercoat, dark highlights, woodland brown, marigold yellow and pure white, all from Reaper Master series. That's the only 4 colours that go into this workup. Okay, so let's start off with that dark highlights now, and we're really covering most of our metallic areas with this. There's not so much need to leave a ton of the black, you just want it kind of in the deepest recesses. We're then going to move up to that woodland brown. We're now going to start to target some areas that we'd like to be a bit brighter. Then reinforce that woodland brown. You see how what I'm doing here is I'm still kind of obeying that basic principle of highlighting of shrink the shapes every time, but I'm leaving darker areas in the middle of volumes, not just on the edges like you would if you were highlighting towards an edge. So what happens is that we have these sort of dark light interplays happening, and that's kind of the difference between a metallic surface and just a normally highlighted surface. This sort of switching up from light to shadow, light to shadow, light to shadow. Now I'm getting over to the marigold yellow. You can see I'm starting to now look for where those light areas are that I've created and just lighten them further, but shrink that shape. It's not a case of lots of foreplanning has gone into this. I've just arbitrarily picked areas that I want to be the bright areas, and then I just keep on brightening them. Now starting to get into some highlights with a mixture of pure white and marigold yellow, and this is thin at this point because I do want it to blend through. Now we're getting back into some reshading. This is just me redarkening some of the areas that have gotten a bit too bright. So it's a glaze of dark highlights just to drop into some of those areas, and then back to mid-tone to blend back out of that. Adjusting backwards and forwards is quite important. You do need to be willing to just kind of nip in, nip out, go up, go down, make sure that you're happy. If you just sort of say you're happy on the first run, you'll probably find that you've got something you want to go back to and correct anyway, so you may as well just correct while you're doing it. Starting to reinforce highlights again now, it's getting really bright. We've got a mixture of that yellow and white going on again now, picking out some little dots now. Just really pushing those highlighted areas. And now adding just a spot more white to that mixture. There is still a touch of yellow in this, it's not quite pure white. Save the pure white just for the really fine little sparkles. See a few of those going on. Back to a slightly diluted white. Just some final few highlights spotted around here and there. And that's the pure white now, I believe, going on just for the final dots. Little bit of shade correction here just to separate some of those areas. If things get a little bit too bunched up, it can be nice to just pop back in with your shade colour here and just clean that up a little. I also decided I wanted a bit more dark in the underside on the right of the Aquila, so I just started my work up again from the woodland brown, the dark highlights, and going up through the woodland brown, back into the yellow, and back into the highlight tones. little corrections as you go. Some more pure white just to re-accentuate those areas from before. A few more last little dark corrections. Micro adjustments are your secret to getting it to look finished. Again, just playing with the midtones a bit here, back up into the highlights. Not being afraid to go backwards and forwards. Final highlight. And there he is. Alright, that's the first section down. The Aquila on the chest is looking nice. Now, I just want to take a second to talk to you about the idea that I'm pushing here. You can see from my commentary, I'm not really going into a ton of depth about why I'm doing what I'm doing, and that's because it's really straight off the dome. I'm just picking areas that I want to make bright and making them brighter, moving tighter and tighter towards the edge as I highlight them, and then I'm also picking adjacent areas and making them darker. And it's really that contrast between dark areas and light areas meeting, that's what gives you the metallic effect. So as we go forward and look at the rest of the down cam footage now, I just want you to keep that in mind. Where the highlights are placed is entirely off the top of my head. It's just how I'm placing them that has a plan behind it. Light into dark, dark into light, creating those contrast zones so that it looks like it's metallic. Let's get back to down cam. Alrighty, starting with this helmet now. I'm going in with my Woodland brown first of all, and I've decided I want to push my highlights kind of similarly to how you would highlight a helmet if it wasn't metallic to start off with. So the top of the little panel that floats over the helmet, the front above the eyes, the visor, just all the little areas that stick up really are where I'm going to build my highlights. One thing that I am going to take care to do, whilst I coat the entire visor in the brown, I am only going to start highlighting it mostly on one side, as if one side is giving off a big reflection and the other side is relatively, it's not really hitting any light. You'll also see here I make a random decision as I'm adding in the Woodland brown layer to start to have kind of these weird little circular shaped reflected areas. I'm just starting to build the first stages of them here. And I made a decision fairly early on that I quite liked this. You'll see these little pinpoints of circular light on metallic surfaces, and I do like to add them in here and there. I think it helps sell that non-metallic kind of vibe. I don't think it's necessarily something you have to do every single time. I just really like what it achieves. We're starting to reinforce that now with a mixture of the Marigold yellow and the Woodland brown. You can see we're starting to get quite bright now. But we've got some good red tones, some good orange tones going on. Now we're switching to just one side of the visor. Now into some yellow. This is pure Marigold yellow at this stage. Again, building up those little circular shapes that I decided I liked. Keeping it really bright on one side. And you'll see I've got that big bright highlight on the left of the top of the helmet, but it's the right of the bottom of the helmet on the visor area where I'm concentrating the highlights. Again, it's that contrast of light against dark, creating that look of metallic. Really starting to push some big highlight on that one side of the visor there. And I'll start to dot in some smaller areas in a slightly brighter colour. There's a bit of white in this, but not a ton. White into the mix now, and some shade correction as well. Again, it's always important to go back and do a little bit of shade correction. You really need that definition, that contrast between light and dark. That's really what sells it. push our highlights even brighter now. Again, I'm sorry for the focus when I'm dead above the miniature like this. I know that it can be a little bit annoying to watch, but it's very, very difficult to get the camera to focus both when the miniature is flat and when it's upright. You do just have to turn it upright every now and again. Okay, brighter still now, adding more white into our yellow. You can see that these highlights are really starting to punch up now, which is why I'm really, really significantly reducing the amount of space that I'm highlighting into. All these paints are very thin as well, so there is a lot of transparency as they layer over, but they're not as thin as a glaze. They are somewhere between a layer and a glaze, I would say. Getting even brighter now. Just picking out really small, fine little areas. Tidying up, brightening edges. Super, super bright now, almost at white. Barely any goes on now. Almost just a little edge and pinpoint highlight. Now the pure white. Tiny little dots, just here and there. We're just pushing those bright areas to be super bright, make them look reflective. Again, spot shadow correction. And there he is, the helmet. Okay, so I have been a bit cheeky here and I've skipped forward to after I'd finished the rest of the non-metallic. And I won't normally show you everything as a complete process, but if you look at the rest of the volumes that I had left to do, the majority of them are either small and therefore, you know, you're kind of limited in what you can do with them, or they're just very similar to the Aquila, and I kind of didn't want to bore you with lots of me doing the same thing. So you can still pretty clearly see what I've done here for each of those shapes. Just take a little look and have a think on it. Should get you where you need to go. Alrighty, that's all the gold done, so now we're going to be moving on to the silver. Hopefully you've been able to gather from what I've shown you with the gold what I meant about just keeping it simple. This workup is really just concentrating on contrast and not on highlight placement, and I just can't keep ramming that home enough. It's really going to help you so much. We're going to go through, as I say, to the silver now. There's a lot of other sections to do. You will notice something slightly odd here, that I'm going to be doing a yellow toned silver, and that's because I figure that the silver's probably going to be catching a little bit of sympathetic reflection from the gold. You could, when you do your silvers, you can tone them to red, to blue, to purple, to really anything you want. But I like to tone them to whatever the other main metallic is. I just like the way that looks. It's really a decision just for me. We'll go back to downcam now and I'll show you how that's going to go. You can let me know in the comments what you think about having the silver toned towards yellow. Okay, so just a quick talk about the colours for the silver workup. Mojave white, which is an off-white, Tenere yellow, which is a desaturated kind of pale yellow, and solid black from Reaper Master series, which is our go-to black. I tend to use it for most things. Okay, so making a start with this silver, we're going to take a dark grey first of all, and just start to place highlights, again, just where we feel like they should go. I still want to be keeping that contrast in mind, so as I'm placing these highlights, I'm going to make sure that I'm giving myself room to go light to dark, light to dark, light to dark, as we have been doing through the rest of the process. There's a couple of panels on the back of this bolter that I decided that I want to make quite bright. Sorry for the little bit of off camera there, I will be back on in just a second. But for the most part, I'm keeping all of these sections of the bolter in that light to dark contrasting kind of look. As we go on to the ammo feed here, initially most of each panel is going to get a hit, at least on the side that's exposed to the light, with this darkest grey. We'll come back in later and probably shade back down to more of a black in the centre of some of those panels, but at least initially dark grey is going to be covering at least most of the areas that are exposed to the light. The bits that are completely blocked, the bits that are kind of tucked in around his cape and leg and stuff like that, we're just not going to worry about. We're now just getting the back of that done, and again just treating each panel individually but always highlighting towards the same direction. A little bit in around the backpack, there's a couple of little silver accessories on that, a little pipe underneath, and then there's the areas around the vents, the little rings, which I just kind of dot some highlight just onto a couple of sections of. Those are the really easy bits to get a good dark light look going on with. The chain on the front here, just kind of highlighting the links towards the center to be the brightest essentially, and as the links start to tuck in down the sides of him, we'll get a bit duller. That's just really to fall in line with that highlight that's on the chest plate there. And that's where we look after that coat. Alrighty, now a lighter grey but also a thinner grey for this section. Just continuing to work what I've already started. Where I'd already decided that I wanted to start creating some bright areas, just continuing to push those up in those directions. And where I kept things dark, just continuing to keep them dark. As we go around the ammo feed panels, I'm trying to make a point every time there's one of those long straight lines between the panels to kind of draw a bit of attention to that, help separate those panels, and that's going to help them just look shiny. We continue going underneath the ammo feed as well, but starting to get less highlighted underneath. The backpack just continuing the highlights that were already there, and the same for the little metal adornments on the back of the backpack. Moving towards edges mostly. Okay, continuing still to get brighter now, but also keeping my paint thin still. We are pretty much at glaze consistency right now, just because I don't want this to get too bright too quickly. I want to be able to control the really bright spots with my white. So this is more just to kind of reinforce the previous layer and start to guide it towards a brighter kind of zone. Again, you can see there's a few panels on the back of the bolter that I wanted to keep really, really sort of pingy, really bright. Again, those parts on the backpack there, just continuing to reinforce what I'd already started. Same as we get to the underside, tracing some nice long edge highlights along the sort of extremities of those blocky parts. This is where we start to really get to accentuate the edges of the boxes on the ammo feed. Tracing around each individual shape. And as you can see, I've really sort of chosen where I want the light to focus, and I'm just kind of continuing to work within those same spaces, just pushing up, pushing up. A couple more bits on the chain, again focusing towards the center to stay in line with that chest highlight. Okay, another stage of highlights now, brighter still here and still keeping that paint very thin. I find with the silver NMM, it's more important that I keep my paint thin so that my transitions are nice and soft than it is with the gold. The gold seems to like slightly harder, edgier transitions. The silver really seems to want you to keep them as smooth as possible, so that's what I've done here. And again, just going around, reinforcing those existing highlights, and starting to kind of decide now where I want the extreme highlights as well. We've started to build up enough layers of colour now that I can kind of know where I'm going to want those pinpoints of very, very bright highlight, where we're starting to get towards actual white. So now that I can start to make those decisions, I can start to kind of put some little circle shapes in here and there, like we did with the gold, I can start to just push those final points and make those decisions. This is just mapping out for the final highlights though. It's not really making them yet, it's just kind of creating transitions for them to sit onto. A couple of last little touches onto some of the smaller areas. Again, just continuing to push the direction of highlight that I've already created. Some final little touches. And there we are. One little adjustment as well. Just wanted one more coat on the back there. So now that I'm starting to step up into the main highlights, my paint is much thicker now. This is where I want to start isolating the areas that are going to have pinpoint highlights on them and really working up towards a spot where I can add those final highlights. So again, this is sort of half a stage of reinforcing what we did previously, but it's mostly just starting to plan those final highlights now. This is what gives me space to now start pinpointing in with almost pure white. It's going to allow me to get those really bright sort of sparkly areas. As you can see, I made a little thumb correction there. You can always just white paint off if you're quick enough when you first put it down. I'm going to start going around the last of these zones on the bolter, really starting to get some brightness going on. Because this paint is a lot thicker, we do need those nice smooth transitions to lead up to it, otherwise it's just going to look blocky. So you have to spend a little bit of time just glazing in some transitions softly to give you the space to come up and then start to put those harder edge highlights in. You see now we're starting to pick out some sparkles on the furniture on the front of the bolter, and now we get onto the ammo feed and start to do lots and lots of fine lining. This is the really controlled part. You can see my hands are pushed really tightly together here to eliminate as much shaking as possible. It is super important that if you're going to start doing these parts that involve a ton of edge highlighting, that you give yourself a nice firm base to work off so you can keep the shake out of your hands. I do make a couple of mistakes here, which I believe I later went back and corrected off camera, but for the most part, it's pretty easy to get it in nice and cleanly, providing you just give yourself a good firm brace. We use the side of the brush there as well to put a few extra highlights in. And you can see this is really starting to make the surface look shiny now. Onto the backpack just to get some sparkle into those little highlights that we started making. Again, really moving towards corners and edges now. Not really much of this going on in the center of any of the volumes. A few more little taps on the chain and on the front of the bolter. Okay, so before I go in and do my final sparkly highlight now, I'm just taking some of that black, neat, thinning it to a really thin glaze and just starting to pull contrast back into these shapes. It was starting to just look a bit like blended grey and not metallic, and so I'm just coming in now, creating some separation and some space here and there to let that contrast breathe. This is a really important stage, and I like to save doing it till just before I do my final highlights, because that gives me the greatest idea of the difference in contrast that I've created. Anywhere where it's just starting to get a bit too fuzzy grey, just pushing it back down towards black. A couple of coats in some areas, just a single coat just to dull it off a bit in others. And then some pure black, just to correct a few little errors. I forgot to mention the white that I'm using for the really sparkly bits. It's Dragon White from Reaper. Really, really bright, full coverage white. Now you're going to see me starting to apply that, really just in pinpoints, keeping this very, very fine just to make sparkles. And as we did with the gold, this final highlight of white really just wants to be on those areas that are the most reflective. Just in corners and edges, side of the brush there. Very, very sparing. If you go overboard with this, it's just going to destroy all of that build-up that you've done, so really do try to be sparing with it. Just keep it to the tip of your brush, just the odd dots here and there. Okay, so now we've just set up the camera to give you a final little spinny show. I've got one of those cool little spinny turntable things, and I wanted to take advantage of it, and I also felt like it really helped show you everything that we've done a little bit clearer, so you can kind of see as we come round to those silver highlights especially, how we concentrated the contrast there. Alright, so that's where we left it for part 2. And hopefully I managed to communicate this to you in a way that wasn't too mentally taxing. I know for me, when people were telling me to go and check out all those really advanced artists, a lot of it actually created more questions than answers for me. So I hope that we managed to break it down into a way that's simple. Just get it into your heads, concentrate on contrast, and make highlight placement just the thing that you do the way you feel like doing it. Highlight placement, far less important. Contrast is really what matters. Lots of light next to lots of dark creates the look of reflection. Hopefully that's going to get you there. Now, I have to say, folks, this video would not have been possible if it wasn't for a friend of mine over on Twitch. I would love for you to go and check out twitch.tv/miniaturesden. He helped me immensely with getting my head around this idea of contrast over highlight placement. Contrast matters, highlight placement is secondary. He really, really did help me with that. And there's lots and lots of examples of him doing that. He paints NMM very, very regularly. So if you want to see kind of the more advanced level that you can get to based off of this principle, Miniatures Den is the guy to check out. So again, thank you so much, Luca, for your help in getting my head around this, and please do have a little look-see over there. Now, another quick thing before we go, I just want to thank everybody for the massive amount of support that we've had. The channel is, for all intents and purposes, brand new. We've only really been starting to make regular content for a few weeks now, and people are really getting behind us. We've got that custom URL already. We've got over 100 subscribers straight away, and that's great news for me. I really do appreciate it. So please do continue to like the videos, to subscribe to the channel. I will be back with part 3 very, very soon, where we'll be starting to talk about the cape and the power sword, which are both going to use a similar blending system to get them up to looking like something pretty cool. So do join me for that one soon, folks. I will see you around.